Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. I'm Eric Hansen from OTT.X. On behalf of the whole team, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's a privilege to share with you the experience, insights, and information from the people that are shaping the OTT streaming industry. Before getting started today, I want to make sure to let our audience know that we're offering a special 20% non-member discount to our upcoming flagship conference, the OTT.X Summit. It's later on in August 30th and 31st in Los Angeles. This discount is offered for all non-members of OTT.X. Of course, attendance at the conference is free for all OTT.X members. So to get this 20% discount, we're going to be dropping a special link into the chat later on in the session. So I want to encourage everybody to take advantage of that. Be watching for that later on. Today, we're excited to have with us two executives from Aniview for a deep dive into managing and monetizing FAST channels. Whether you're all in with FAST or just doing some investigation initially, the session will provide invaluable insights and the learnings from those in the front lines of the FAST industry, including strategies to effectively scale your channel operations, how cloud playout can revolutionize your content delivery and management, and revenue generation opportunities through targeted advertising and monetization techniques. All this and much, much more. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Aniview's SVP of Sales and Business Development, Anna Burdin, and GM of North America, Greg Smith. Welcome.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate the great intro. I'm going to actually, as you mentioned, I'm the GM of North America for Aniview, and I'm joined by Anna Burdin, who's actually the SVP of Sales at Aniview, which is a partner company of ours as well. Anna, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Indeed, I represent Aniview, which is a partner of Aniview, and happy to be here. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Fantastic. So before we go into the agenda, just we figured it made sense just to give you a little bit of background about Aniview and Aniview. We actually did a partnership in February of this year, and it's been a fantastic partnership. So essentially, Aniview is essentially our combined playout solution. And Anna will talk about how to best optimize your playout solution moving forward. And essentially, Aniview's component of the partnership is really around channel monetization. So that's both programmatic and direct demand. We also have an ad server. We've been a video player company for over 10 years, and also have a server-side ad insertion solution as well. So I'm going to just quickly go through the agenda. I'll first talk about the market outlook. A lot of interesting things going on with CTV advertising and programmatic, as well as the global growth of FAST. We'll really talk about the US market, as well as the rest of the world, and then also just talk about the US FAST growth. And then I'm going to turn it over to Anna, who's going to talk about cloud-based playout. Essentially, what is it? How do the workflows work? What are the features and benefits, as well as talk about distribution opportunities. And then I'll close the session by talking about how best to monetize FAST channels. So essentially using programmatic advertising as well as other means, and then really talk about a three-engine approach that we think about. And then last, we're going to solicit questions. So Eric will be getting questions throughout the session. Please do forward them in the chat, and we'll hopefully we're going to have about 15 minutes to go through Q&A. We really look forward to that session at the end. So I'm going to move into the market outlook and talk about CTV growth as well as FAST growth. And I think the first thing that's really interesting here is, in fact, this is incredibly timely. I don't know if anybody saw the release from Nielsen, but for the very first time, it turns out that streaming video has surpassed viewership, a time of viewership, than broadcast or cable TV. It's a huge, almost tipping point for our industry. And one of the things we put together is just kind of the idea of where does CTV advertising, which again, when we talk about CTV advertising, we're really talking about anything that's streamed on a CTV device compared to, let's say, when we think about TV, basically cable and broadcast. You can see over the years, if you look at kind of CTV advertising as the black bar, part of the bar, and then broadcast and cable combined as the red bar, you can really see that connected TV advertising is growing share compared to broadcast and cable. And that trend is expected to continue. If you look at what I like to call a CAGR or a compound annual growth rate, CTV advertising is expected to grow around 13% per year over the next 4 to 5 years, whereas it's expected to decline a few percentage points for broadcast and cable combined. You'll also see that the actual total pie, however, in terms of TV advertising, should grow slowly around 3% per year over the next several years as well. So now if we kind of look at CTV advertising, now kind of on the left side here, another way to think of this too is how is that growing as a percentage of all digital advertising? And if you look at the blue line below, you can see that it's slightly growing as a percentage of digital advertising, roughly or a little bit less than 10% this year. We think if you look at the eMarketer numbers, they're projecting that it's going to grow by another percentage point by 2027. If you kind of take those numbers and then you match them with the expected numbers for connected TV that will be programmatic, and we'll talk more about kind of what is programmatic, what are our recommendations around programmatic later in the webinar. But I think the key factor here is a vast majority of the CTV advertising is being traded right now programmatically. So it's roughly around 86%. And it looks like that number will be stable, slightly higher between, say, 2023 and 2025. So now also, if we basically look at the FAST universe, and what we found actually in preparing this presentation is that there really aren't any numbers out there for the US market. There are projections for 2027 out there, and we took did some triangulation as well as actually looked at some of the data that we had on our side at Aniview, and have prepared essentially, I think from what I can tell, is the first numbers around how big is the US FAST market. And we think it's roughly about $4.7 billion in 2023. And candidly, when I first looked at that number, I thought that's pretty high. We really went back and forth and looked at kind of average viewership, looked at the CPMs in the market and so forth, and feel pretty comfortable around that number. So ultimately, if you look at the global FAST market, right now it's roughly at around $5.5 billion, and their projections are that that'll grow to about $12 billion by 2027. So if you break down kind of where's the growth going to be from the US compared to the rest of the world, the FAST market for US is going to grow at a CAGR of around 21%, which is certainly healthy and greater than that of the CTV advertising market. But we also think the rest of the world is going to be even at a higher compound annual growth rate of 32%. I think, but the key thing here too, and we'll talk a little bit more about the international market in a moment, is that the US represents a huge chunk of the global FAST market today, around 89%. So another thing we've put together is just like, okay, how big is FAST relative to the overall CTV advertising market? And if you look at you put the numbers together today, it's roughly about 19% of the market. And as I mentioned earlier, the FAST market we think will grow at a greater rate than the CTV advertising market. So ultimately, by 2027, we think that FAST could represent as much as a quarter of all CTV advertising revenues. So a pretty substantial chunk of the market. So back to kind of international markets, and as I mentioned earlier, the US is a dominant force in the global FAST market. But that is starting to change, over time, and the rest of the world will kind of inch forward with additional share by 2027. If you look at kind of the next sized markets, interestingly, the next big three are English-speaking markets, and that's probably no surprise from the standpoint that a lot of the content that's created in the U.S. is used in the UK, Canada, and Australia. And UK being the next market, with Canada and Australia as kind of quick followers, and then the fifth market expected in 2027 will be Germany. So a little bit deep, kind of diving in a little bit deeper into those first four markets. Kind of why would rest of world essentially be growing at a slightly larger clip? One of the reasons is that there's more space for distribution of fast channels. If you look at the U.S. market, I think, and by the way, I think there was a great OTT.X webinar 2 weeks ago where the panel really talked about the challenges of new fast channels getting distribution and carriage essentially across operating systems. And we're really at a point of saturation, if you will, in the United States. It's pretty typical for a platform to accept between 250 and let's say 300 or 400 channels, and they're kind of full. So your ability as a fast channel to get distribution, if you don't already have it in the U.S., is generally going to be because you're beating out somebody else. In other words, there's going to be a swap as opposed to kind of some organic growth. And whereas that's just not the case, really, if you look at other countries like Australia, UK, and Canada, there are still slots available, if you will, to get in there. And these platform companies are now allocating more resources, kind of waiting for the growth to happen across countries like the UK, Australia, and Canada. But they're starting to invest and starting to see kind of uptick in that market. So one strategy may be, and we're starting to see that too, and I know Anna will probably talk about this as well in her slides, that essentially if you're trying to find distribution, it may be easier to do that and start outside of the United States. I think one other thing too, is it's already been mentioned at many of the OTT.X events, and I look forward to the summit in a couple of weeks, is now there's this issue in the United States of discoverability. How do I even find, now that there are 300 or more channels in an OS platform? A lot of platforms are focusing on the user experience and how to actually make users make it easily discoverable by the user to get to a particular channel. And this is the last slide I'll talk about in terms of the market outlook. I'm actually going to start on the right. eMarketer came out with some interesting estimates on the actual audience growth of premium video streaming, essentially fast. And the numbers were not what I would call phenomenal. In other words, if you looked at the growth of viewers, it was only growing at a CAGR of about 3% plus, not that substantial, such that basically even by 2027, only about a third of the folks in the US would actually be watching fast on a semi-regular basis. So how is the market, if you kind of look back to the left now, how's the market going to grow? And implicit to that is that essentially ARPU, or average revenue per user, will grow among fast channels. And that kind of also makes sense as discoverability becomes better. We think the existing users and viewers of fast channels will actually start watching more channels, and then also obviously being more engaged with the existing channels that they're watching. So average revenue per user or per viewer will essentially grow, almost double between 2023 and 2027. I'll also say, just to give you a gut check, if you will, and how does this compare to, let's say, for example, Facebook or Meta? They're doing over $200 a year in ARPU for US users, to give you a sense. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Anna, who is going to talk about cloud-based playout.
Hello, everyone. Once again, we're going to move to some technical stuff here. but the fast channel is not possible without a playout, like any other channel. And we're going to speak what exactly the cloud-based playout is. If Greg, you can just give me the right to.
Sorry, I thought I approved it. Oop.
Nope.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, good. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So actually, the cloud playout can be used not only for fast channels, but also for traditional broadcast channels. And it's just a software that allows you to create your channel. So it automates live and on-demand content, media asset management, scheduling, and literally with the cloud playout, you can deliver your channel to any kind of platform, starting with traditional platforms like satellite, IPTV, and also fast channels, because we're talking today, of course, about fast, and OTT. What is the advantage of cloud playout? Well, if you have on-premises playout, you need to find a space in your office for that. You need to either hire people or allocate headcounts to take care of the whole setup and technical stuff. Cloud playout allows you to set up your channel in hours. And I think very important thing here, I know that Greg's slides looks very promising in terms of the revenue, but you still want to manage your cost. Because fast is based on the advertising. There is no fixed revenue like in the traditional pay TV world, when operators used to pay per every subscriber or fixed amount of money. And that's why to manage your cost is very important. And you do it with the SaaS, which is a purely monthly plan. And it's much cheaper than traditional playout, and you can manage it on monthly basis with no surprises for you. Also, in today's world, it's very important that your team can be remote. They can work from anywhere. You just need to have a good internet connection, and people can sit in different parts of the world. Also, a cloud playout allows you to scale up easily. For example, let's say your first fast channel was successful, you want to launch another 5, you can also launch it very easily without any capex. And of course, it allows you to be flexible and fully agile, which is necessary with this business model and in our world today. And you can start the monetization right away, because the cloud playout is coming with a whole set for the monetization, including the famous CATI 35 markers. So the playout has all the features for you to have the proper channel. By the way, today there is more and more demand from the platforms and from the viewers to have the channels looking as good as broadcasting channels. I'm going to speak about it in a second. So you really want to have the channel which has multiple audios, for example, or multiple subtitles. And you know that nowadays the audience, because of Netflix, for example, is used to have multiple audios and subtitles. Also, the proper graphics. You want to have something that looks nice and looks professional, not just a piece of content after another piece of the content. So the cloud playout allows you to completely manage your content through MAM, so the media asset management system, work with different kind of formats for video and audio, and then program it, add all the necessary subtitles, audios, add graphics, and the graphics can be very complicated or can be simple. Usually fast channels go with simpler options. Even with fast, you can have live feeds, You can do more complicated stuff if your playout is advanced. And of course, then in the end, the channel that is put together can be delivered at any format which is required either by you or by the format. But usually the fast channels, they have their requirements for the channels. The important features of playout are really content ingestion, because you want your content to be, with good quality, to go through the quality control, quality check. You need to have a proper media asset management, which allows you, to store your content, to replace it, to do different things with it. And of course, your content should be scheduled and delivered. Let's go to see what the content ingestion does. The content ingestion is literally the process of importing, if you want, uploading your content into the system, preparing it and organizing it. So you can upload here the videos itself, also audio files, metadata, which is very important for the EPG, and also metadata is going to help the viewer to find your content. Here you can work with different formats. Not every playout has it. The advanced companies do have different kind of formats, because different platforms have different requirements. Also, it's really good to have multiple subtitles and audios, because it can help you to localize your channel easily. The scheduler and playout. So for the scheduler, it's really how you build the schedule, the planning of your channel. And by the way, fast is built a little bit different as traditional channels, because people have different viewership habits. It's not that, it's traditional hour when people come back from home and they watch channel at the same time. Here, the scheduling can move, and we really think that it's good for the channels to analyze the data, see when people watch the channel, what kind of content they watch, and based on that, rebuild the scheduling, because it can help to improve the viewership of the channel. The scheduler is really a crucial part of building your channel and set it up for the success. Sorry. So Greg already mentioned about the platforms. So today we kind of distinguish the mainstream platforms and emergent platforms. So the mainstream platforms are those who everyone wants to be on. Those are Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Rakuten, Pluto, and so on. The emergent platforms are smaller platforms, but it is easier for the channels to get to the emergent platforms. They're also more flexible in terms of the revenue share, in terms of the genre, and in terms of the localization. Today, the mainstream platforms have a very strong trend for the localization. So if you want to be on Samsung TV in, for example, Holland, you'd better have a Dutch content. In Italy, you'd better have it in Italian, at least subtitles. By the way, Samsung today is also asking for AVOD to be available for the fast channels. So the requirements here are also for localization that I have already mentioned to you. And also there are the requirements for the brands. So somehow we can say that the mainstream platforms become the new pay TV platforms. They want to have bigger brands, they want to have exclusive content, and they want to be localized. Where the emerging platforms still can give you decent monetization and viewership. Sometimes they look at mainstream platforms and want to replicate them, or sometimes they want to do something different. And for example, go with the community channels or some niche channels. But we can see that the number of platforms continue growing. And the strategy in terms of the acquisition of fast channels is changing rather rapidly, because they use data. And based on this data, first of all, if the channels don't perform, they just take them down. Or if they see that there is a request here for the particular genre, they would replace, and they would do the same also for the territory or for the language. So what are the playout benefits for fast? Well, you need to have, first of all, playout to run your fast channel. It's very easy to do it, even if you never had any linear experience. For example, you sit on the catalog of a very good library. You still can create the channel very easily. It's really copy-paste, drag and drop system. And it's also very quick. It helps you to monitor the performance of your content and to see the user behavior. And as I mentioned before, you can adjust your schedule, you can improve your viewership, and thus you can improve your monetization and get more money. Your fast channels can be delivered to multiple distributors. Today, of course, we speak about the mainstream platforms that everyone wants to be on. Once again, there are smaller platforms that we mentioned, but now there is this new trend that the telcos and pay TV platforms want to have the fast channels as well, either part of the AVOD or part of the bigger package. They used fast as a retention. And of course, you can also start the monetization by inserting ad breaks into your stream. While we're going to speak once again about the monetization, I give the screen back to Greg.
Thanks, Anna. Appreciate it. All right, on to monetization. So how can you monetize fast channels? Oops, I'm sorry. Basically there are four ways. You can engage in direct selling, so have your direct sales force, if you have one, call on agencies and advertisers and try to sell them advertising. Another way you can monetize is essentially enabling your own programmatic advertising technology. So you could essentially work with supply side platforms directly and enable them to monetize some of your inventory on your behalf. More commonly, I think among most OTT.X members, they've typically joined a video marketplace. And essentially what that is an organization that have experts that do this for a living. I mean, they work with multiple SSPs to maximize yields, but they get a certain rev share out of that. And then the fourth, and probably the one most familiar with folks on the line here too, is licensing and syndication. Great opportunities, obviously, to monetize the content that you have through those means. For the sake of this discussion, for the rest of my presentation, I'm going to focus on the two blue dots, if you will, in the middle. So though I will talk about direct selling a little bit, we'll focus primarily on the programmatic ecosystem that's enabled either by kind of a do-it-yourself method or by joining a video marketplace. So wanted to kind of just take you through a few terms, if you will, like a glossary, if you will, and kind of how does this programmatic ecosystem essentially work? First off, programmatic advertising basically refers to essentially an automated process of buying and selling digital advertising by using software, algorithms, et cetera. And one of the key cornerstones of that of those transactions is real-time bidding. So real-time bidding is basically as the name suggests, it's truly real-time, where when an ad is just about to be served, there's an auction that happens in real time. Typically, if you look at like a display advertising or online video, those transactions can happen in just a matter of a few milliseconds. It's essentially a blink of an eye. There's an enormous amount of information about the user or the device or the program that's basically relayed to a whole slew of different systems called demand-side platforms that make a decision and a bid or a decision not to bid on that inventory. And essentially the demand side platform is being used by a brand directly, or in many cases an agency on behalf of the brand as well. So if you kind of look at supply side platforms, if you look to the left, are essentially the platforms that enable the ability to bid on the inventory, and that's essentially done by the publisher will bring in one or maybe even multiple supply side platforms to, in essence, enable that inventory to be auctioned off at any time, and to characterize that inventory as best as possible. So maybe genre information could be in there. There could be something about third-party data or even first-party data that the publisher has that might be helpful or interesting to one of the buyers on the demand side. And then essentially in the middle here is a video marketplace. Like I mentioned, typically a video marketplace is full of experts that is essentially hired by the publisher who decides, hey, we don't want to do it ourselves. You guys are kind of the experts. And the video marketplace will work with multiple supply side platforms to essentially squeak out as much revenue as possible for the publisher and get a piece of the action by doing so. And those video marketplaces, by the way, are typically very much in contact with demand side platforms regularly, saying, hey, we just brought in some new inventory you might be interested in, or we just upgraded our inventory in a certain genre or in a certain region and so forth. So there's a lot of, you can see these arrows between these organizations. Many of them are not only just talking kind of one to the next, but 2 or 3 hops away as well. So kind of what are the benefits of programmatic advertising? One is just efficiency. I remember starting my career at Young & Rubicam in New York and providing paper orders for local broadcast television to local sellers who would literally come to my desk and pick up the piece of paper. That was incredibly inefficient. Now, everything is kind of hands-on keyboard. Everyone has a sense for where the inventory, why it's valuable, and so forth, and can integrate data to make that happen. It's just a much more efficient process. The second, speaking of data, is the ability to do targeting. This is predominantly done on the advertiser side, but also can be made available through first-party data on the publisher side as well. Many advertisers have become razor focused on targeting to a particular audience, and that might be done through cookies. Obviously, in the CTV universe, that might be done more through some sort of device ID or login ID. And that world is evolving as we speak, but marketers are very much focused on targeting through digital media, and that's a huge advantage of programmatic. There's real-time optimization. There's no need to go to an account manager to change your campaigns and so forth. If you're an advertiser, you can just make that change right on the fly. You can start changing your bids or your bid strategies. Get rid of part of a campaign, turn it off, turn another one on. This can be done in seconds. Again, it's all real time. And then lastly, personalization is really helpful. This can be done with non-programmatic advertising, but it's just a lot more difficult. The fact that particularly when an advertiser is doing audience-based targeting, in many cases, they're going to want to match that creative unit with that data in some way, shape, or form, or they may also want to personalize that ad associated with the content, your content, that might be a really good match as well. So when we think of kind of like, what are the kind of the 3 things you got to have to make programmatic advertising work? First, and every single solution out there in the marketplace, whether you may not be aware of it or not, or work through some sort of third party, you have to have these 3 engines to make everything work. So one is a video ad server. And I'll talk more about kind of how that plays kind of a traffic cop function, if you will, across all the different systems. The second engine would be some sort of sales strategy, which I just talked about, right? You can have direct sales, or you can have programmatic sales. Candidly, there are a lot of, particularly OS platforms that do a combination of those. And then third, you need to have a dynamic ad insertion, so that essentially there's a seamless experience for the viewer, as opposed to essentially have it kind of a choppy ad that runs in your content. So a little bit more about video ad servers. So first off, if you kind of look to the left, essentially it's a place to kind of collect all your demand. So those could be self-managed sources. So in other words, like supply side platform tags that you may have, or you may have something what's called a dynamic unified auction, for example, which is essentially like header bidding, where you're kind of collecting a whole bunch of different bids, or essentially a whole bunch of bids dynamically from different programmatic players. You could have direct campaigns if you have direct salespeople, or again, you may connect your ad server to a marketplace where you've got a group of experts working on your behalf. You know, the ad server, like I mentioned, is kind of acts as a traffic cop, kind of trying to optimize all those different demand sources all in real time across programmatic auctions, as well as really what we call the waterfall. There may be even rules that are in the video's ad server that may not make all that much sense. I'll give you an example. You may have a huge advertiser that struck a great deal at a lower CPM, but they mandated that they run their campaigns and pace their campaigns on time, so that it could be that they're even a higher priority than, let's say, a higher bid programmatically. So you may have to create a rule and say, even if I'm going to make less money, I still want to make sure that ad runs from that big advertisers where I cut that big deal. This is where you make all those rules in the ad server. And essentially then the ad server, once it's kind of decided, okay, through its guts, what is the best ad to serve, it basically calls the dynamic ad insertion or server-side ad insertion across the CTV platforms, and then the end user sees the appropriate ad. So I've talked about direct sales and programmatic. Just a few other thoughts here. I mean, basically, direct sales, can often be used by getting what I would call the top of the pyramid. Where there's, like I mentioned in the earlier example, if there's a huge customer that you're trying to get an enormous amount of spend, I mean, in the millions, it very well may make sense to have a direct salesperson calling on those campaigns. You might, for example, if you're a sports site, and the top brands like Nike and Adidas that you need to call on, it's probably better to have a direct salesperson do that and focus on them on the top of the pyramid. And typically direct sales gets higher CPMs for sure, but also you have to cover the cost of those salespeople. Our prediction is that just like CTV advertising, over 85% of FAST ad revenue will eventually be, is already actually generated via programmatic. And that number very well may be more like 90 to 95%. As I mentioned also, I mean, if you want to do kind of do-it-yourself programmatic, you could initiate something like a unified auction where essentially 3 to 5 supply-side platforms are being called simultaneously, with the idea of trying to essentially yield the highest CPM for every single impression. But more often than not, we're finding that fast channels work with some sort of programmatic marketplace that is full of experienced media traders who already have the relationships with multiple SSPs and work on your behalf to maximize your revenue, but get a piece of the action. And it's not uncommon for distribution platforms to, in essence, kind of act as the seller themselves for fast channels. In many cases, taking an inventory split. In a few other cases, and they may even mandate, if you want to be on our platform, you need to, we need to be able to monetize your inventory. And typically, they may basically deploy kind of a combination of both direct sales and programmatic strategies. And then lastly, talking about dynamic ad insertion, I mean, again, this is really about making the viewer experience as seamless as possible. So if you look at kind of the left side here with the bunnies in the video stream, ultimately what's going on is we need to kind of prepare the content, and that's one of the other key things about having an integrated solution with playout, to say, hey, where are the markers? Where do we actually want to put ads in here? Many of you may already have content that is like from television. So the markers and selecting those slots are pretty easy. I mean, that's where the ad breaks were before. In some cases, it's not so easy. In some cases, you may even have live content as well. So it's really, really important kind of where you put the markers. And there are a whole bunch of components, if you look to the right, that are, whoops, I'm sorry, considerations that are really key. Where do you want to put the ad pods? Where you put the ad markers. This concept of prefetching is also important too. And essentially what that means is, contrary to like display or video, we've actually got a little bit of time to run that auction. It's still run very, very quickly, but we know where the next ad break is going to be. So we run that auction well in advance of the actual ad break as well. And through all of this, I mean, ad tracking is critically important to understand, your return on investment as an advertiser. So ultimately, looking back,
can I add, sorry, Greg, can I just add something here? Because there was also the question, on top of markers, you need to have so-called segments. So all your content for fast channels will be segmented. Usually it's 20 minutes, and then you have your ad break. Yes, the playout is coming with all the monetization solutions. It's coming with segments, opportunities, and SCOTY 35 markers. So literally everything that you have here, it's ready for the monetization. And then the monetization is getting through. So this is to answer the question that we had as well. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Anna. And yeah, essentially then once all that work in essence has been done, then it's all about the ad server, rerouting and optimizing essentially the CPMs and the inventory and the calls from the SSPs and the DSPs to find out what's the best ad to run there. All right. So we are near our conclusion. So real quick, just kind of recapping a few notes here. Ultimately, I mean, our thinking is that US CTV advertising is going to continue to grow at double-digit growth for the foreseeable future, particularly in light of, I mean, it's very clear that the eyeballs now are a majority of our viewing time is in streaming video on CTV devices, which is super exciting. And now it's really all about the advertisers kind of catching up. So that double-digit growth will continue for, I think, quite some time. And then, we think FAST will grow at an even greater rate, driven by increasing ARPU for each viewer. The US dominates the global FAST market, but the growth rate is going to be greater in the rest of the world, with countries like the UK, Canada, and AU leading the way. Cloud playout is essential for the success of FAST and to get scale and monetization from day one. And as Anna kind of implied in her last comment, we're working together to make sure that essentially when we flip the switch, it happens all at once. There's no, we know that once we've moved in, initiated or essentially got the system running, we want to monetize from truly day one, from second one. Playout, enables distribution of FAST across multiple platforms and geographies. We talked about the different platforms and obviously the growth of the rest of the world for FAST. Monetization can work and, obviously be done in many different ways, like direct ad selling, programmatic advertising, video marketplaces, and licensing and syndication. And lastly, I think the key thing is just, if you're going to do programmatic, you really need to focus on the kind of the three engines, the video ad server, the video marketplace, and dynamic ad insertion as well. So with that, it looks like we have some Q&A, which is great. Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks a lot. Terrific overview, both of you. Thanks so much. It's amazing to me how much technology is actually going on behind the scenes when I'm watching a fast channel and seeing ads. It's phenomenal that somehow it actually works most of the time anyway. One question or something I think it'd be interesting to talk about is, given how smart this tech stack seems to be, why is it that so often I end up seeing the same ads over and over? Is it just that there aren't enough buyers, and so the only thing to play is this same Snickers commercial, or what's really going on here?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny. We thought that by 2023 that stuff would not be happening, right? That was kind of a 2020 problem.
I mean, I'm not asking for flying cars, right?
Right. No, it's and it's still a real problem. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Eric. Ultimately, it kind of comes down to, right now, the FAST ecosystem or AVOD even for that matter, is still incredibly fragmented. And we're still, like, if you look at the advertisers in much the same way, if you kind of look at even the viewers, not all advertisers have embraced the ecosystem. So there are actually kind of fewer advertisers out there, let's say, compared to, let's say, broadcast or cable TV. I think that's part of the problem. I think the other issue is that they're just flat out just controls on the server side ad insertion, right? I mean, in our platform, we definitely have rules that are very, very clear that we do not, that you're not going to have any kind of repetition of an ad within the same break. I mean, that's just kind of a no-no. There are even, provisions we're seeing, in terms of, like, make sure that my ad does not run next to a competitor, as well, in much the same way that you get for, you would get in broadcast television. So still, kind of still early stage, but there are definitely rules out there to prevent that from happening. That doesn't necessarily mean, publishers are activating that. And again, that's part of and that's something I would recommend to any fast channel, is just, like, make sure that you set the rule with your DAI provider and say, look, I cannot have the same ad running in the same pod. That's just off limits. And you know what that might mean too, is that you may not monetize as well, right? The system, if not told to run double ads, it will run them, because essentially they're kind of, maybe the bid is at the highest level. So the point being is just that it's better to, that's a good example of, like, it's better to actually maybe lose a little bit of money, but have a better user experience.
Yeah. So there's somebody's bidding on it somewhere that's not, in my example, Snickers, but the CPM or the bid might be just really, really low. And so, okay. So it's just basically good old fashioned technology greed, or greed embedded in technology that's driving.
Well, also just kind of, again, how you set the rules on the ad server side, and the dynamic ad insertion side, to make sure that situation doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, it seems like we're seeing less and less of that. And there's also cases where there's no ad at all, and that seems like somebody's got to be able to put something there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Great suggestions about international versus domestic distribution, especially for channel or for content creators that are starting out. I'm wondering, Anna, would we expect there to be different components or configurations when we're distributing content to different territories from the cloud, in the way that you set it up operationally? Or is it, I can just put it up there, I've got content that I can distribute around the world in any territory for cloud playout, or do I need to configure it differently?
Or it depends on the rights, right? If you have no issues with the rights and your content is available and has rights everywhere, then it can be available everywhere. Otherwise, it can be geo-blocked. Some of the platforms are geo-blocking their content as well. For example, you can see Samsung, it has different content in different countries. content owners can also geo-block. They just say that, oh, we have rights only for Canada, only for the UK, so it can be also done. And then, of course, there are natural limits, let's say, by the languages as well. But otherwise, yes, it's already being implemented. It's already being done, so it's configured by territories and countries and languages.
Okay. So we also talked about DSPs and SSPs, and I'm wondering if, well, first of all, what does it take to get your data into that? Are there standard formats? Can you talk a little bit about just operationally, what does that look like in the real world?
Yeah, great question. Fantastic question. So ultimately, in working with an SSP, think of it this way: an SSP is going to provide information to its DSP partner, and that's very formatted. There's a protocol. There are multiple protocols, not only with what we call real-time bidding and open auction, but also in other private marketplace protocols as well. But ultimately, what an SSP is going to want to do and a video marketplace is to provide as much data in that kind of bid, what is called, essentially it's called a bid request. Here's as much information as we have here. So for example, if you have the genre, and there are standard IAB, Internet Advertising Bureau content codes, for example, categorizations, you want to use as many of those as possible. The protocol basically allows you to put in as much data as you can. I'd say that, and there are other companies out there, like third parties like Iris TV, for example, who essentially can categorize your content and then essentially enable that for the demand side platform. They ingest that information, and that very well may change their bid or make them bid. But I'd say the number one thing would be data. And so if you have any first party data and your ability to, and in the protocol, you have some space, if you will, in that bid request to personalize your information and provide that. Now, I don't recommend personalizing it. I recommend getting it standard to some other protocol. But your first party data can be, if you've got registered users, who are logging into your app or your OS, that's an amazing opportunity to pass on information that you may have even reconciled with some sort of third party, for example, demographics and so forth. Obviously, assuming this is all, with user approval, but it can be incredibly rich, and that can make an enormous difference in how not only the price that you get in CPMs, but also just uptake you get from the bids, meaning you're going to find more bidders for that inventory.
Yeah, it's almost like, that's I was thinking it's almost like a resume, right? You want to get as much stuff in there because it's a computer on the other side of that's right. Scanning. It's not a person, and you want to put all of the tags and all of the metadata in there that machine is looking for. Now, I wonder is that something that can be managed real time, or can it change? So in this day part, this is my metadata. These are my genres that I really want to highlight. And then versus in this, so if I'm running it at 2 o'clock in the morning, I have an idea who might be tuning in at 2 o'clock in the morning and what they might be interested in. And so those are the genres that I'm going to maybe hit on versus the same content running at 10 o'clock in the morning or something. Can that be managed that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, on the demand side platforms, in fact, they may, that's a whole kind of science, if you will, that agencies and their advertisers are focused on as well. And they can even put in their, when they create the campaign, we only want this campaign to run between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. because they know something about that audience. Usually, candidly, it's very inexpensive to reach them. Just like as you watch on late night television, same thing. And it's true in the internet as well. So you can actually create those rules, and there's a whole group of advertisers out there that are trying to kind of buy on the cheap, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So last question. Where do you see this technology going? What's sort of the next things that we can that it can enable? It seems like it does everything, right? Are we done, or what can it do? What do you see it doing next?
I'll start, but Anna definitely wants you to chime in as well. I mean, I always like to, and maybe this is very American, but I always like to say, I think in the kind of fast and AVOD world right now, we're in if this were a baseball game, we're in the bottom of the second inning. We got a long, long way to go. Yeah. And I think it's mostly on adoption and education as opposed to technology. Not to say that, there are always going to be advances in technology. I think candidly, measurement is also a key driver in the marketplace, where advertisers who are typically comfortable with Nielsen, can they get comfortable with kind of digital advertising, and specifically CTV measurement as well. But generally, I think this is more about, we've got the tools for the most part. Now it's really about taking those eyeballs and converting them into to ad revenue.
Interesting. It seems like a great opportunity for OTT.X to help the industry
Indeed.
Understand the opportunities here and how to navigate them. Anna, last comments from you about really anything, or where you see the industry going?
Yeah, I think that there are going to be many changes. Definitely, I think that the fast platforms want to become the new telcos. They want to kind of accumulate everything in one place, right? All content. They now want to go for the content creation, original creation. So they will compete with the OTT, with the pay TV, and we can see it happening. And we can see the pay TV and telcos, as I mentioned before, already answering that. So it will be, I think, further content war, which will be beyond pay TV, Netflix of the world, and now fast platforms. And I think that definitely there are going to be changes in the industry, because some people are still skeptical. They think that fast is just a new trend and it will disappear, and let's see how it's going to go. Some are really strong believers, especially for the retention of cord cutters and younger generations as well. So it's going to be another interesting year or two to see how the platforms are going to develop, how they're going to build their strategies. I think at some point there are going to be mergers between them as well. And I think that the devices will be used by the platforms for the competition. Like, I don't know, TV sets will be given away with a cheaper price, exactly like the mobile producers. Remember, they were not the producers, but the telcos were giving away the mobile phones for almost for free, right? So probably it's going to happen the same in the industry as well.
All right, great insights. It is a very green field, or a lot of blue sky in this space. It's so exciting to be part of. Well, we're at time now, and I know we could probably go on for the rest of the morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. But I want to thank Anna and Greg so much for that wide-ranging discussion. It's a great overview, and something that I'm going to refer to and refer more of our members and those that are seeking to learn more about the space too. So thanks very much. And with that, also want to mention that that video and the presentation itself will be available to OTT.X members in our library of content, our vast, with a veritable cornucopia of content from many of our presentations, webinars, conferences. I want to thank also our dear audience for attending and for your continued support of OTT.X. I mentioned the session was recorded and it'll be available on our website shortly. I also want to remind everybody about OTT.X's upcoming flagship conference, the OTT.X Summit. It's on August 30th and 31st in Los Angeles. I know I'll see Greg there. Looking forward to that. It features 2 days of conference programming and workshops, including presentations, panels, and research insights, exhibitor booths, business meetings, the Heroes of OTT.X Awards, networking breakfasts, lunches, cocktail parties. It's all there. We're hoping that you're looking forward to seeing many of our members and those that are interested in learning more about OTT.X in the industry there. And as I mentioned earlier in our session today, we're offering a special discount for those that are attending today's webinar, a 20% discount for non-members. Of course, it's free for OTT.X members. That's something that you're interested in. We'd love to talk to you about that as well. Jose is going to drop the link into our registration page and a special discount link for those that are not members. Do take advantage of that. It'd be great to see some new faces and many of our friends from our membership as well. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks again for joining us and for being a part of the OTT.X community. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We'll see you very soon.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Bye.
Bye.